All right, let's try this again. We were live a second ago and we had a brief technical error, but we should be good to go now. We're on my iPhone, so I'm looking right at a screen where I should be able to see questions, comments, likes, anything that might allow you to participate in what's going on. But that's okay. I have something to say anyway, and I'll save this video off and put it up on YouTube as per usual. Scheduling a live stream for a small audience on New Year's Eve, Christmas Eve might not be really conducive to massive audience building in any case. So I really have two things I want to talk about. One is I'd like to talk about this whole mess with the Rockettes and the Trump inauguration, which leads us to talking about the Trump inauguration performances as a whole. And then if we're still going strong when that's all done, we can talk a little bit about how that might relate to an entirely other topic in the way the entertainment industry and a fair amount of America is sort of really trying to distance themselves and delegitimize the Trump presidency and what the effects of that are going to be. Anyway, let's go back to the Rockettes. So for those of you who don't know the story, Trump is having an inauguration party the way most presidents do, and they are not getting a ton of participation from the entertainment industry. Obviously, a lot of your big name performers, Beyonce and Katy Perry and all these people, they were all massive Hillary supporters, and as a result, they are, unlike in previous elections, they've been so polarized in this election that they are simply not going to perform for Trump, which is sort of interesting. Certainly a ton of middle America didn't vote for Obama. He was deeply unpopular in big segments of middle America, and yet you never really heard of like a deeply conservative country and western star being like, screw the White House, I'm never going to go play there. I don't want to be anywhere near that guy. But here we are in 2016, deeply divided, socially divided, because make no mistake, the Trump election is at its core a cultural war battle, not necessarily even an economic one. So anyway, Trump's having this party, and it is a point of pride in the entertainment industry and something the Huffington Post and all these people are making a big deal about. Oh, Donald Trump is having trouble getting people to perform. So I don't know why they think we care deeply. I'm not going to be sitting here on election day thinking, oh my God, if Katy Perry doesn't sing at Donald Trump's inauguration, the next 4 years are going to be a nightmare, and I don't know what I did with my vote. If Katy Perry decides to, never play the White House again, that's fine with me. There's no end of people that I think deserve to get recognized, spend a little time in the White House, as opposed to the same 20 cultural names that we just get stuck with every time anyway. So I don't care, and no Trump supporters care. We didn't care about these people when Hillary trotted them out by the dozens to try and shore up her illusion that she was an actual human being instead of a robot. I see no reason in the world why we should care now that they didn't decide to jump on the Trump train. We don't need you anyway. You didn't make a difference before, and if your support didn't matter, then your lack of support is utterly irrelevant to us. But anyway, so there's Donald Trump trying to plan this party, and there's not a lot of performers lining up of the traditional high-profile group. But in the end, the Rockettes, the organization that manages the Rockettes dancers, and the Trump organization came to an agreement, and it looked like, as far as we know, the Rockettes were going to perform, the whole troupe. Now, individual Rockettes who, because of the industry they're in and where they're based, obviously not big Trump fans, and a fair number of them are somehow or another convinced that performing at the Donald Trump inauguration is a lot like performing in a Springtime for Hitler without the irony. So they don't want to perform, and instead of acting like rational adults who don't want to do the job they're being paid to do and don't want to fulfill the contract they've signed and quitting or accepting the consequences of not doing the job and getting fired, They want to not do the job they agreed to do, not do the job that they're contracted to do, and then face no consequences. So they want to leave the management of the Rockettes organization high and dry, not go dance at the inauguration, force the management company to go find other dancers to take their place, and basically they're going to cause all this nightmare, but they want that to happen with no repercussions. So they don't want to be let out of their contract. They don't want to recognize the fact that in the future the management company may rationally go, you know what, the last thing in the world I want to do is work with, Jane Smith, because it turns out she's just like an overly dramatic prima donna, and I'm going to have to run every engagement we take past her political filter to see if she can handle it, or if I'm going to have to get her like a puppy pull and a crayon. If I was managing that group, I would fire every single one of these dancers who was even whining about this. Just get rid of them. And if you look at your social media timeline when these Rockettes went public, and obviously they go public, call the Huffington Post, and it's a whole nightmare, but you look at the support from the social media side, and they're like, the Rockettes shouldn't be forced to perform for Donald Trump. And that word forced, that's the critical factor here. That's the thing that tells you most what's the thought process behind the supporters of these dancers. Let's say I hire you to build a house, and you build me a swimming pool, and I decide I'm not going to pay you because we agreed you were going to build me a house, and you're building me a swimming pool, so I'm not going to pay you unless you build me a house. And you go and whine to someone else and you say, that mean guy is forcing me to build him a house. And they say, how is he doing that? And you're like, well, he's not going to pay me if I don't build him this house. And I really need the money because if I don't have a job, I can't pay my rent. So he's forcing me to do it. And no, that's not force. The exercise of economic discretion is not force. If you're not going to do what I need you to do, what I want to pay you to do, and I decide not to pay you because you're not doing the thing we need you to do, that's not force. Me having to pay you even though you're not doing the job you're supposed to be doing, that would be force. That would be force. Because you would have to get someone with a gun to come and shoot me to give you money, basically, if you're not doing anything for me. So these Rockettes, they're not going to do the job they were told to do. They're not going to do the job they agreed to do. And when faced with the consequences that you and I and almost everybody else in the world would face if we didn't do the job we made an agreement with someone to do, they complained about it, and they complained long and loud, and there was all sorts of, you go read the Huffington Post or go read Daily Kos, or for that matter, there's not much daylight between CNN and the Huffington Post, or go read, anything MSNBC has out on the web, because they're basically the Huffington Post at this point anyway. And again, you would think that the Rockettes were being marched in front of Trump in chains and, forced to dance at gunpoint. And that's just not the way it is. Yet, the same people that seem to feel that the Rockettes not performing for Donald Trump is an exercise of their conscience, these same people often are the ones who were up in arms when a baker, didn't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding because it was against their religious practice. And that's the cognitive dissonance. That's the beautiful insanity behind the position of some people on the left. So if a Rockette decides not to perform for Donald Trump, that's them acting conscientiously. If a baker decides not to bake a cake for a gay couple, that's the baker abusing the gay couple. If a pharmacist doesn't want to prescribe a particular form of birth control, that is, in theory, from the left, an act of anti-female, almost violence, the way they react to it. So, there's no logic behind it. Either you have the right to not offer your services and talents in the assistance of people who are doing things you don't ethically agree with, or you don't have the right to withhold those services. And I fall firmly on the side of you do have the right to withhold the services. I absolutely support the right of an individual rockette to decide she is not going to go and dance for Donald Trump. Like, more power to you. Have the courage of your convictions, and I will respect you. But you do know you're going to get fired. In exactly the same way that if I took a contract with someone to build a website and they decided that, you know, their website was going to promote an idea that I disagree with and I decide to walk off the contract, well, I don't expect to get paid either. I'm the one who's not doing the job. And it's the same thing for, you know, an individual baker. Let's say the bakery was fine with the gay wedding cake job, but an individual baker or cake decorator within that bakery decided that they were not going to be part of it, that they weren't going to decorate that cake. I would support the right of the bakery as a whole to fire the individual baker. So if you own a company, I believe you have every right to decide who you're going to do business with. If you work for a company, I believe you have every right to decide whether you're going to participate in the actions of that company as a whole. But in both cases, you have to accept the economic consequences of your choice. So if I'm a company and I decide I'm only taking work from left-handed redheads who are under 5'3", then I'm not going to get a lot of work. And that's just the end result of the choice I've made. If I am a baker and I've decided that I'm only going to bake wedding cakes, I'm only going to work in bakeries that do entirely gay-themed weddings, then I might not get a job because there aren't going to be a lot of those bakeries because maybe there wasn't enough demand for it, and so on. I have no intention of forcing anyone to do work they don't want to do, but I also have no intention of forcing the people who would otherwise be paying them to compensate them for not doing that work. And that's freedom. That's freedom in action. If you don't like the work you're being asked to do, don't do it. And if the people you're offering money to are not going to do the work you want them to do, don't pay them either. Exactly the same freedom for everyone. And that's the only way this stuff works. You can't say, we're going to force doctors to perform abortions, that they don't have the right to not do that procedure. We are not going to say we're going to force bakers to bake cakes they don't want to bake. We can't say those things and then say it's wrong to force a rockette to dance. What you'll see when you actually look at the position many people hold is that they basically say, they weasel word out of this. They go, well, obviously, you know, the only reason you don't want to bake a cake for a gay couple is because you're you know, a homophobe, and as a result, that's hate speech, and we're not going to suggest, you know, we're not going to tolerate hatred, so we can force you because your opinion is wrong, whereas you can't force our people because our opinion is obviously correct. And that's the weasel space. As soon as you start bringing motivation into personal freedom, everything goes out the window. And I don't make a distinction between, if you don't want to bake, you know, a wedding cake for a couple because they're gay, I don't care if your objection is because you just think it's in bad taste, or whether you just politically disagree with the idea of homosexual marriage, or whether you have a religious objection. I don't consider religious objections to be special or sacred. It's just an objection. My objection as an atheist, if I'm an atheist, is every bit as valid as my objection if I was staunchly religious. So anyway, that's the way this Rockettes thing is. Now it looks like, in the end, the Rockettes organization has backed down and decided that they're not going to take negative action or punish the individual dancers involved, if I understand what I read right before we went live. And that's a shame. I don't think you should back down in the face of this stuff. If somebody's not going to do the job you contracted them to do, you fire them. And that's the way it is. And to bow to public pressure, and we've talked about this a little bit before, and we'll no doubt talk about it again. Bowing to public outrage when you're in the public eye is suicidal. Apologies never work when the lynch mob is at your door. There's no reason to it's not like the Rockettes are going to back down and now the left is going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, they're an enlightened organization. No. The left is always going to remember the Rockettes organization as those guys who were going to force the dancers to dance for Donald Trump until we all signed a petition. And the result of that petition is they back down. They're not going to think that you maybe were reasonable all along. They're not going to think that maybe you considered their arguments and agreed with them. What they're basically going to do is decide that you are weak and that if they put enough pressure on you, you will fold. And that is not a situation you want to be in at all. So basically that's sort of the Rockettes situation. I think the dancers shouldn't have had to go. I think the organization should go. And I think, in a nutshell, you should have fired everyone who didn't want to dance that way. And that seemed pretty reasonable to me overall. Now, how that goes into the larger sense, though, you know, this idea that huge swaths of the entertainment industry who were already deeply out of touch with the American public, which is why we in particular care when they were unhappy during the election, that if they're really going to spend 4 years doing this, playing this game where they're just going to drag their feet like petulant children, and we're not going to go to the White House, and we're not going to perform, and, you know, we're going to tell Ivanka Trump to take our paintings off of her wall, and we're not going to design clothes for her, and we're just going to be children about this all along. And I can support their right to do it. See previous conversation 3 minutes ago and still think they're children for their decision. I just support their right to be children. If they're going to do that, there is going to be a consequence. And the consequence is this. They will become irrelevant to 48% of the country. If they think that they're going to hold us hostage, they weren't paying attention to the last election. Because that election was the act of the American public standing up and saying, we're not going to be held hostage to your opinions of us, to your judgments of us, to your suggestions as to how we should act. You're an entertainer, entertain me or shut up. You know, do the thing or don't do the thing, make the movie or don't make the movie. I'll go see it if I like the fast cars, and I won't go see it if I don't like the fast cars. But that's the end of our relationship. If 55 of you get together and tell me that I and everyone I know is a racist, I've ceased to care. And by removing themselves from any possibility of interaction with the demographic that just beat them like a mule, they will simply give us both the impetus, the time, and the space to replace them. Remove themselves from us, and it's not like we're not going to want music. It's not like we're not going to want to see movies. It's not like we're not going to want TV shows or watch YouTube or do live streams or commentate. It's just they'll no longer be part of the equation. Beyonce will move out, and all these people will decide they're not going to, because what's the end game? They're not going to put their records out in our, in that half of the country, and they're not going to do any concerts in those places that voted for Donald Trump, and they're not going to do concerts in any place that passes a law they don't like, and they're not going to do concerts in any place. And eventually, the list of places they're not going to perform will get so large that there will be a vacuum, and people who do want to perform in that space will take it over. And you see this. I'll tell you the canary in the coal mine on this: t-shirt companies. Go look at the popular culture as represented in t-shirts. And I can think of 9 and growing profitable t-shirt companies that employ dozens of people who weren't there a year and a half ago. And those t-shirts are pro-gun, pro-freedom, pro-America, pro-counterterror. I can get any number of t-shirts now that say, whatever. Kill them all, let God sort them out, to give the example of the classic sentiment. And yes, there were always a couple of shirt companies that did that before. but to have flourished in the popular culture almost exclusively through social media advertising in the last year gives you an idea that what's happening is that whereas before, 2 years ago, pre-Trump, maybe, and towards the end of Gamergate, companies felt like they couldn't express those sentiments because they were going to alienate the snowflake crowd. They were going to alienate the left, and as a result, they weren't going to make any money. And what's happening is they are realizing that there are enough people, that 48+% of the country, 47 or 46 or whatever that percentage was, 46% of the country believes what they believe. And you know what? You can make a great living in a market that's 46% of America. You don't have to go for 100%. Focus in on that 46 that's been abused, insulted, and ignored by every company that tried to sell to them, every comedy and TV and sitcom and Saturday Night Live. The entire entertainment industry spent 2 decades crapping all over that demographic. And they took it because they all thought they were alone. And now that we know that 48% or 46% of the people around us feel that way, half of everyone in the room when I'm out and about are statistically speaking, maybe Trump supporters, though obviously that skews for local demographics. That changes things. That changes how I sell things. Herd watching. This particular podcast as a whole, I hope I get demographics across all 46% and the other. I want to be inviting to those people that don't agree with me, but you know what, if nobody who voted for Hillary Clinton ever watches this live stream or watches my YouTube videos or reads my blog, there are enough people who are on my political side of the spectrum that will be just fine. So it's starting now with that separation, and I support the right to do it, but that separation of culture, because the left and the culture drivers on their side just can't handle the fact that they put everything into this, and we went the other way anyway, and they are throwing a tantrum about it. They're throwing a tantrum like children. And do I support the right to throw the tantrum? Yes. Now, do I think it's a principled tantrum? No. Because these are the same people that are perfectly happy to go play for dictators. These are the same people who are perfectly happy to go have a concert for Barack Obama while he's holding people in Gitmo and surveilling Americans without warrants. These are the same people who are perfectly happy to play for Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton back when they were anti-homosexual weddings. So let's not talk about their principles as if they're inviolate and that these are pillars of political purity. No. What they're really annoyed about is that they thought they had our culture under their thumb. They thought they told us what to think and we did it. They thought that if you packed the entire cast of the Avengers into a serious looking movie video telling me that I absolutely positively have to vote for Hillary Clinton, that I would. Hillary Clinton thought 30,000 people packed into a concert hall to watch Katy Perry shake her ass was going to translate into her voting. And that the people at home were going to watch MTV and be like, oh my God, everybody on MTV tells me that it's critical and I'm going to go vote that way. They put everything into this and we shut them down. They lost anyway. And they have no idea how to handle it. They're absolutely coping with the idea that they no longer run this culture. That in the end, you're just an actor. You know, that you don't own culture. That Joss Whedon, for all of his influence, can't get all the hot chicks and good-looking guys together and change the course of the presidential election. Oh, how that must piss him off. Can you imagine how annoyed these people are? To find out that in the end they're just minstrels. They're just entertainers. That Scarlett Johansson is pretty and she's smart and I'm sure she's a reasonable human being, but I don't give a damn whether or not she wanted Hillary Clinton to be president. She looks good in a jumpsuit, but let's not confuse that with political acumen. I'm perfectly capable of making my own choices. Oh, how much that kills them. And that's the best part about it. I mean, I love Trump's policies, and I'm happy to vote for him anyway. But the opportunity to remind the people who have spent decades telling us that we're irrelevant, that we're not, is like the, it's like the warm fudge over the sundae that is the Trump win. Anyway, we've been talking about this for a little while. To those of you who are viewing, I really appreciate it. We might do this again. We'll see how the response to this video is. I'm going to take it and put it up over on YouTube. If you have any thoughts on the format, you have any thoughts on the topics, you have suggestions for other topics, by all means, go ahead and throw them in the description below or comment on them. And if you are of a mind, like and follow the Herd Watching page on Facebook, and then head over to YouTube and search for Herd Watching. You'll find these same videos, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel over there. I appreciate the time. I hope you guys have a fantastic holiday, whatever holiday you're celebrating. And I know it's in vogue to be like, oh, screw 2016, but God, I love 2016. I mean, there are a lot of bad things that happen, but the Trump win, just amazing. And I'm really looking forward to 2017. I think it's going to be good for the country, and I know for a fact it's going to be good for those of us who are in business, capitalists. Enjoy your holiday. Buckle up. Let's get through New Year, and then we have an enormous amount of work to do because demand is going up, money's picking up, the industry's picking up. I've gotten calls from client after client after client who are holding off on doing work, who now feel confident enough to do it. We're going to be doing more videos. We got a whole bunch of stuff coming up. Enjoy your holiday. I'll talk to you guys later on. Take it easy.